One important point I think to make is that the changes that I'm going to talk about in a moment are not new. It's the pace of the change, because what makes this crisis so unique is that the crisis happened at a time of exponential change in technology that was already transforming the way we work, how we engage with clients, how we make decisions. And in fact, in January, we announced that we were putting in place a new operating model we call the growth model. And we said we were doing so because we were beginning the decade of enterprise-wide transformation enabled by digital and technology. And so what was happening is that the crisis happened at the backdrop of all of this change already in motion. And then you instantly had behavioral change at a scale that we've never seen, in the past. And that's important because the biggest theme in terms of what's really changed is the pace of the transformation that had already begun. And what we thought would take a decade, we believe will take more like 3 to 5 years, depending on the industry. And so you first of all have the acceleration of technology and digital being adopted, with cloud being at the very top of the list. We thought we would get to sort of 80% in the cloud from the 20% we have here over the next 10 years. And we think we'll on average be there in the next 5 years, and much faster for some. So the cloud is at the top of the list. The second piece, though, is actually the ability of companies to move faster. And so this idea of speed and what it looks like, because companies did change and have to change overnight. And for the most successful companies, it has really changed how they're thinking about driving new business models, new ways of working. And of course, the very obvious one is the ways of working. 75% of companies today say that they are completely replanning how they're going to operate. And it's not as simple as I'm going to have more remote workers. And it's everything from, what can I automate if someone can really be 100% remote? What should I outsource because I've got to focus on other things and I need to move faster? What should I move to be, different parts of the world, either because of cost or to access talent? And how do I permanently operate with at least some people being remote part of the time? And then you add on top of all of that, what I think has been an incredibly good outcome here is a focus on employees in terms of mental wellness and their well-being. And then also, and this was counterintuitive at the beginning, a focus on sustainability. On March 1st, which was 6 months after I started, we reduced our matrix. We changed our P&L, which, as you know, in the middle of the fiscal year is huge. And we'd had that P&L for 3 decades. We took out 30% of our management nodes, and we changed 200 of our top 300 leaders' roles. It was an incredibly huge change. And we did that March 1st. Now, when you fast forward, and it was an organizational change in part, now you fast forward to September, and I announced another organizational change. We created something called Accenture Cloud First that brought together all of our resources around cloud with a $3 billion investment over the next 3 years. Now, the old world would have said, if you just put in a big change, you can't make the organization change again, another massive change. But here's the point. An agile organization, which was what we were focusing on, right, makes itself adaptable to what's happening. And as I said before, cloud has been a huge acceleration. And so we knew that we had to change in order to capture that opportunity and serve our clients. And not one person said to me, Julie, we can't change again. We just put the biggest change in our history. And that's so important because the mindset has to change. Pre-COVID, we were trying at the very top of the house to work in sprints, and that's how we moved so quickly to put that operating model change in place. But we needed to then say we have to get the entire organization to move faster, given the acceleration I talked about. And so when we began our fiscal year September 1st, we didn't set 12-month strategic goals. Our top 5 goals, 2 out of 5 were only 6 months, to reinforce to our top leaders that we are going to move much faster. And then we set one of those strategic goals is a pilot, again, reinforcing experimentation. And then we were transparent with our 500,000 people that our top 500 leaders are going to be evaluated in their performance around these strategic goals that include experimentation and are being reset in only 6 months. Those are the kinds of things that we have done to respond, and we put in place the model that would allow us to do so. And what I'm talking to many companies now who say we want to move as fast as we did, and I think really across the board, companies should be proud of how they responded to this crisis initially. And they say we want to keep moving fast. And my simple question is, what have you changed? Because large organizations in particular cannot operate in crisis mode forever. And so I asked myself, even though we just put in the largest change in our history, what do we need to change? Because the environment had changed. And that's a lot of what we're doing 9 months in, is helping organizations, think about what do they need to change to compete and to be successful in what I call the new reality. What's happening in Asia is what's happening in the US and Europe. And a couple of stats, 80% of companies say they're going to digitally transform. 62% say they must have more responsible business practices. And so it's both important, but you're seeing different action as well in terms of the collaboration. Well, maybe starting with just the lens of where we spend most of our time, which is advising companies. And one of the biggest challenges is actually connecting the business strategy with responsible practices. And oftentimes, even in companies, you still have kind of old models where those who are looking after things like the environment, it's more around, it's not the president, the head of the business unit. It's often in a corporate function. And right now, there's the speed at which companies are moving is the dots are not always being connected. And one of the things that I'm talking about externally and with our clients is that there's an opportunity that didn't exist pre-COVID to more efficiently achieve sustainable business practices because of that first statistic, which is 80% of companies having to digitally transform. If you think about supply chains, pre-COVID, if you wanted to introduce better analytics to identify the use of child labor in your supply chain, it was an extra cost. It was often driven by someone out of compliance and not the business lead. Now, supply chains have been disrupted. They need to be more resilient. They need better data. And so we're implementing for companies the kinds of analytics where you can now embed the algorithms and the processes to help achieve both the business objective or more resilient and better, more predictive information from the supply chain, while at the same time embedding more sustainable practices. The cloud is another example. We've developed a tool that can measure when you move to the cloud the reduction of your carbon footprint so that the business case becomes melded together with the business value as well as the carbon reduction. And so the opportunity and the challenge, right, is can you change massively with responsible business by design? And that's a challenge because you have to connect those dots and move much faster. And that's a cultural change as well. One of the things I'm most proud about is that after the death of George Floyd in the U.S., we decided to establish external goals for the U.S., the U.K., and South Africa to create more opportunities for our, in the U.S., African American and Black employees, in the U.K. for our African Caribbean employees, and for our people of color in South Africa. And that follows a game plan that we did with women. So back in 2013, we had 36% women and about 250,000 people. We set goals to be 50-50 by 2025. We're now 500,000 people and 45% women. We've been on that journey with respect to race and ethnicity internally, setting goals, holding ourselves accountable, measuring our progress. And we've now set those goals externally. We've also implemented mandatory training around racism and how to speak up about it. We already have mandatory unconscious bias training, but we recognize that we really needed to identify racism specifically because it's different than unconscious bias. And then we're also investing more in our communities. But what's probably even more exciting to me is that it's not just about these three countries. The reaction to what happened in George Floyd at my global management committee, who I asked to support us setting these goals, was that racism is a problem in every country in the world. It's a different problem. It might be around immigrants. You know, in each country, there's specific manifestations of it. But my global management committee felt very strongly that this had to be a global movement. And so in all of our countries, we are now having discussions and identifying the actions tailored to the conditions in the country about how to change the game. We started this deeper commitment to inclusion and diversity back in 2013 when we said we needed to rotate our company from less than 20% digital cloud and security to be at least 70% by 2020, which we've achieved. And we said to do so, we needed to become more innovative, and that required us to be more diverse and inclusive. And so these external goals we've just announced and actions are the latest in actions we've been taking across all kinds of diversity. And we've had a 9% CAGR since 2013. So there's the financial outcome as well. And all companies who approach this with humility, that they don't need to build their own, they should partner, they can learn from others, can absolutely leapfrog. And that's exactly what we're seeing today. Pre-COVID, we had digital leaders, companies like the largest retailer in Thailand, who were investing in digitization prior to, and were able to very, very quickly adapt. You had other companies that weren't investing, and they struggled during this first wave of COVID, but they're approaching it differently. They're learning from all the investments that others have made. They're partnering with, public cloud and other ecosystem partners, and we see them catching up. And you're going to, over the next 6 to 12 months, begin to see the landscape change with those who were laggards leapfrogging, but they're approaching it differently. They have speed in mind, and they have the humility that they partner with others.